You remember the table. Every black function in the 1970s had one, a folding table pushed against the wall, bent under the weight of covered dishes that nobody wrote recipes for and nobody makes anymore. Every person in that room knew what was underneath before they saw it, knew who made it, and knew it would be gone before the deacons finished their second plate. Church suppers, family reunions, repasses, Juneteenth cookouts, the food told you everything, where the family came from, how long they had been cooking, and whether they loved you enough to bring the real thing. One dish on this list was priced like scraps at the butcher counter. Today, the same tray costs more than the whole bird. Another took 3 different batters and a filling that required a full morning to build. And the last one needed no pot, no pan, and no stove at all. Hit subscribe because these are the dishes the next generation needs to hear about. Here are 25 foods served at black functions in the 1970s no one makes anymore. Number 25, cheese straws, sharp cheddar, grated fine, mixed with butter, flour, a shake of cayenne, and pressed through a cookie press or piped by hand onto a baking sheet. They came out thin, ridged, crisp, and salty enough to make you reach for a second handful before you finish the first. At a function, cheese straws sat in a tin near the front of the table, and the woman who brought them never wrote down what she put in the dough. The ratio of cheese to cayenne was personal. Some batches burned the back of your throat, others barely whispered. The press itself was usually older than the woman using it. When store-bought cheese, crackers became the norm, the tin stopped showing up. The press went into a drawer and stayed there. Number 24, ham salad sandwiches. A baked ham left over from Sunday dinner, fed through a hand-crank meat grinder, bolted to the kitchen table. The ground meat was mixed with mayonnaise, sweet pickle relish, a boiled egg chopped fine, and a spoon of yellow mustard. It went onto soft white bread, cut into triangles, and stacked on a plate under a sheet of wax paper. Ham salad stretched one leftover roast into enough sandwiches to feed a card table full of guests. The grinder did the work, and the sound of it turning was as familiar in a black kitchen as the hum of the refrigerator. Children stood next to the table and watched the pink curls come out the other end, waiting to scrape the plate. When the grinder disappeared from the kitchen and the deli counter started selling sliced ham by the pound, the salad lost its starting point. Nobody ground ham by choice when they could buy it sliced. Number 23, congealed salad. Every church supper in the 1970s had at least one Jell-O mold sitting on the dessert table, except it was not a dessert, it was a salad. Lime gelatin mixed with crushed pineapple, cream cheese, and chopped pecans, poured into a ring mold and chilled until firm. Some versions used orange gelatin with shredded carrots. Others went with cherry and cottage cheese. The mold was the point. It arrived at the table looking like a crown, jiggling on a glass plate, and everyone knew exactly who brought it because the same woman brought it every single time. Younger generations killed it, not with criticism, just with silence. They stopped eating it, stopped requesting it, and eventually the woman who made it stopped bringing it. The ring mold went into the cabinet next to the good china, and both collected the same dust. Number 22, watermelon rind pickles. After the red flesh was eaten, the rind got peeled, cubed, and soaked overnight in lime water to firm it up. Then it was simmered in a syrup of sugar, vinegar, cinnamon sticks, and whole cloves until the cubes turned translucent and sweet enough to eat like candy. A jar of watermelon rind pickles sat on the relish tray at summer functions next to the bread and butter pickles and the olives. Making them took 2 days, and a willingness to save what most people threw away. The jars lined the pantry shelf like stained glass, and the women who made them traded recipes at church the way other people traded gossip. When watermelon became something you bought pre-cut in a plastic container, the rind never made it home. The sweetest part of the fruit was the part everyone learned to throw away. Number 21, caramel cake, a yellow layer. Cake covered in a cooked caramel icing that required standing over the stove with a wooden spoon, stirring sugar and butter until it reached the exact shade of amber that separated a good caramel cake from a burned one. The icing had to be poured and spread fast before it hardened, and if you waited 10 seconds too long, the whole batch seized into a grainy mess. Caramel cake was a test of nerve. The women who made it well were known for it across the church. The ones who brought it to a function carried it like a trophy. Younger bakers avoided it because the icing punished anyone who looked away from the pot. Box mix frosting replaced it, and the difference was obvious to anyone who remembered the real thing. Number 20, sweet potato pone, not a pie. A dense, spiced pudding made from raw grated sweet potato, eggs, sugar, butter, milk, and nutmeg, baked in a cast iron skillet until the top cracked and caramelized and the center stayed soft and custard-like. The grating was the labor. Raw sweet potato on a box grater by hand until the bowl held enough pulp for a full skillet. Sweet potato pone was older than sweet potato pie and heavier. It sat on the dessert table and drew the people who grew up eating it because nothing in a bakery case looked or tasted anything like it. When food processors replaced the box grater, nobody used them for this. They just stopped making it. The skillet-shaped crust on top was the signature, and it only formed when raw grated potato hit hot iron. No shortcut reproduced it. Number 19, crackling bread. When a hog was rendered for lard, the crisp bits of skin and fat left behind were the cracklings. They got folded into cornbread batter and baked in a hot cast iron skillet until the bread came out golden, dense, and studded with pockets of salty crunch. Crackling bread required fresh cracklings, which required a family that still rendered its own lard, which required a family that still bought a whole hog or raised one. Each step back revealed another step that modern life had already erased. At a function, a pan of crackling bread sat next to the greens and the beans, and it disappeared faster than the plain cornbread sitting beside it. The crunch told you a family still lived close to the source. When families stopped rendering lard at home, the cracklings vanished from the batter and the bread went quiet. Number 18, fried whiting plates. Whole whiting fish, scaled, gutted, dredged in seasoned cornmeal, and fried in a deep skillet until the tail curled and the skin turned crisp enough to shatter. At an outdoor function, a folding table near the fryer held a stack of paper plates, white bread, and a bottle of hot sauce, and the line started before the first batch came out of the oil. Whiting was the cheapest fish at the market. A family could fry enough to feed a yard full of people for the cost of a single roast. The smell of cornmeal and hot oil carried across the block and told the neighbors exactly what kind of gathering was happening. Today, fish fries still happen, but the whole fried whiting with the head still on, eaten with your hands, bones pulled clean, belongs to a generation that did not need the fish to look polite. Number 17, deviled ham sandwiches on white bread. The little red can with the devil on the label was a staple in black kitchens throughout the 1970s. At functions, deviled ham was spread on soft white bread, cut into triangles and stacked on a plate next to the pimento cheese. There was nothing fancy about it: ground ham, mustard, pickle relish, and enough salt to carry the whole sandwich. Children ate them by the handful because they were small, soft, and did not require a knife. Adults ate them because they were already made when the first guest showed up early. The can was cheap and fed a crowd fast. Today, the red can still exists on grocery shelves, but it sits mostly untouched. The women who built those sandwich plates moved on to deli trays from the supermarket, and the triangles vanished from the table. Number 16, sardine sandwiches. A flat tin of sardines, drained and mashed with a fork, mixed with mustard, a squeeze of lemon, diced onion, and a dash of hot sauce, then spread on saltine crackers or white bread. At outdoor functions, sardine sandwiches sat on a folding table wrapped in foil, and the men ate them standing up near the cooler. Sardines were pantry food. They cost pennies, stored forever, and required nothing but a can opener. The sandwich was not elegant. It smelled like exactly what it was, but the protein stretched far, the flavor was bold, and the people who ate them did not apologize for it. When deli meat became the default, the sardine tin stayed in the cabinet unopened. The men who ate them standing in the yard with hot sauce on their fingers were the last ones who saw nothing wrong with it. Number 15, pickled peaches. Whole cling peaches, peeled and simmered in a syrup of vinegar, sugar, cinnamon sticks, and whole cloves, then packed into mason jars and sealed. The peaches turned a deep amber and carried a flavor that was sweet, tangy, and spiced all at once. At a holiday function, a dish of pickled peaches sat on the table next to the ham, and the pairing was deliberate. The acidity cut through the salt and fat of the meat, making them require ripe peaches in season, a canning setup, and an afternoon of standing over the stove. When the peach tree in the yard was cut down and the canning pot was put away, the jars stopped lining the pantry shelf. Store-bought pickled peaches exist, but they taste like syrup. The homemade ones tasted like a yard and a season and a woman who planned 6 months ahead. Number 14, Japanese fruitcake. The name had nothing to do with Japan. This was a southern layer cake that showed up at black holiday functions and church homecomings from the early 1900s through the late 1970s, and making one was an all-day commitment. The cake itself was built in layers, some plain white, some spiced with cinnamon and allspice. The filling was the labor: fresh coconut cracked and grated by hand, raisins chopped fine, pecans toasted and broken, all of it folded into a cooked filling, thickened with sugar and lemon juice until it set firm enough to hold the layers together. The finished cake stood tall, heavy, and fragrant with spice and citrus. It was not a cake you made on a weeknight. It was a cake you started early on Saturday morning and finished by the time the sun went down. The coconut alone took an hour, cracking the shell with a hammer, prying the meat out, peeling the brown skin, and grating the white flesh on a box grater until your arm ached. At a function, Japanese fruitcake sat on the dessert table and drew a crowd that knew what it cost in labor to get there. One slice told you how long the woman had been baking and whether she learned from someone who took it seriously. The plain white layers provided the structure, the spice layers gave the warmth, and the filling held everything together with a texture that was grainy, sweet, and sharp with lemon all at once. Grocery stores never carried it. Bakeries never offered it. When the generation that baked it stopped standing in the kitchen, the cake left the table without a replacement. Nothing else tasted like it because nothing else required the same combination of patience, ingredient sourcing, and physical effort. The name still circulates in older recipe collections, but the cake itself has not appeared at a function in decades. Number 13, pig feet in vinegar. Whole pig feet, split lengthwise, simmered for hours until the skin turned gelatinous and the small bones loosened in the meat. Then they were packed into a jar or a deep bowl, covered in spiced vinegar with onion slices, bay leaves, and red pepper flakes, and refrigerated until the liquid set into a soft jelly around the meat. At a function, the jar sat near the edge of the table with a fork beside it, and it separated the room in half: the people who reached in without hesitation and the people who looked away. Pig feet were whole hog food. They required a comfort with animal anatomy that the next generation never developed. When the butcher stopped displaying them in the front case, the jar stopped appearing at the table. Number 12, fried corn. Not corn on the cob, not cream corn from a can. This was fresh corn cut from the cob with a sharp knife, then scraped again with the back of the blade to get the milk out of the kernels. The corn and its milk went into a hot skillet with bacon grease, salt, pepper, and a pinch of sugar, and it cooked low and slow, stirred constantly until the natural starch thickened the whole skillet into something halfway between a vegetable and a pudding. The scraping was everything. Without the milk from the cob, fried corn was just sautéed kernels. With it, the dish had a body and a sweetness that came from the corn itself, not from anything added. A woman who knew how to scrape a cob could feel the difference in the resistance of the blade, and she did it over a bowl to catch every drop. At a summer function, fried corn sat in a cast iron skillet on a table, still warm, and the people who grew up eating it could smell the bacon grease and the fresh starch from across the yard. It required corn picked that morning or the day before, because grocery store corn, shipped cold and stored for days, did not have enough milk left in the cob to make the dish work. When families moved away from the people who grew corn and the summer garden became a memory, fried corn lost its only source. The skillet of fried corn was also the dish that told you whether a woman had learned to cook by standing next to someone or by reading a card. The ones who learned by standing knew when to stop stirring and let the bottom catch just slightly, creating a thin crust of caramelized starch against the iron. That crust was not burned. It was the best part scraped up and folded back in. No printed recipe mentioned it because no printed recipe could teach the sound the skillet made when the corn was ready. Canned corn and frozen corn filled the gap on the plate, but never replaced what the skillet lost. Something changed between 1972 and 1985. The women who cooked for black functions made everything from memory. There were no printed recipes at the church supper, no catering trucks in the parking lot. Each dish was personal property. A woman's greens were hers, her potato salad was hers, and if she did not come, that dish did not appear. When those women aged out of the kitchen, the dishes aged out with them. Some of their daughters learned. Most did not, because they were the first generation to hold office jobs, commute 2 hours a day, and buy what used to be made from scratch. That was not failure. It was the cost of progress, but the table noticed. Number 11, chow chow, a tangy, chunky relish made from the end of the garden. Green tomatoes, cabbage, onions, bell peppers, and hot peppers, all chopped and cooked down in vinegar and sugar with mustard seed and celery seed. It was canned in mason jars and brought out at functions to spoon over beans, greens, and black-eyed peas. Chow chow turned a plain bowl of field peas into something sharp and bright. Every jar tasted different because every garden grew different. The woman who put up 30 jars in September had enough to last through Easter and enough to give away at Christmas. When the garden rows turned to grass, the canning pot dried up with them. Store-bought relish sits on shelves today, but the jars taste like vinegar and sugar. The homemade kind tasted like a specific garden in a specific September, and no two batches were alike. Number 10, fig preserves. In the deep South, fig trees grew in backyards without being asked. The fruit ripened fast in the summer heat, split open on the branch, and had to be picked and cooked the same day or it spoiled. Fig preserves were made by simmering the whole fruit in sugar and lemon juice until the syrup thickened and the figs turned soft and dark. At a function, a jar of fig preserves sat next to the biscuits, and the people who reached for it knew whose tree it came from. When the family sold the house, the new owners usually cut the tree down. The preserves left with the family that planted it. A jar of fig preserves from a backyard tree tasted nothing like anything in a grocery store because the figs were picked ripe and cooked the same afternoon. That speed was the secret, and the tree was the clock. Number 9, tomato gravy over biscuits. Pan drippings from breakfast bacon or sausage, a spoon of flour stirred in until it browned, then canned tomatoes crushed by hand and added to the skillet with salt, pepper, and a pinch of sugar. The gravy simmered until it thickened into a rough, tangy sauce ladled over split biscuits. Tomato gravy showed up at morning functions, Saturday breakfast after funerals, early reunions, church fellowship meals that started before noon. It required nothing that was not already in the kitchen. The can of tomatoes, the drippings from the morning meat, the flour in the bin. When breakfast shifted from the skillet to the cereal box in the drive-through window, tomato gravy lost its occasion. The skillet still works. The morning that needed it does not exist anymore. Number 8, bologna salad. Take a ring of thick sliced bologna, run it through a hand-crank meat grinder, and mix it with mayonnaise, sweet pickle relish, mustard, and a boiled egg chopped fine. At a function, it was spread on white bread or scooped onto crackers, and it fed more people for less money than almost anything else on the table. The taste was salty, tangy, and completely familiar to anyone who grew up eating it. Children asked for it by name. The hand-crank meat grinder made it, not a food processor, not a blender. The grinder that bolted to the edge of the kitchen table and turned a cheap ring of bologna into something the family claimed as their own. When the grinder went into the attic, the salad went with it. Number 7, turkey wings and gravy. In the 1970s, turkey wings were priced like scraps. The butcher set them aside because the holiday shoppers wanted whole birds and the weekday shoppers wanted thighs and drumsticks. Nobody fought over the wings. A black family buying a tray of turkey wings at the meat counter was buying what amounted to leftovers, and the price reflected it. The wings were seasoned heavily. Salt, pepper, garlic powder, and paprika rubbed into every fold of skin, then browned in a deep skillet with oil until the outside was dark and crackling. Then they went into a roasting pan, covered tight with foil, and baked low for hours until the meat was falling away from the bone and the pan juices had thickened into a natural gravy. Some cooks added onion and celery to the pan. Others poured in a little chicken broth. The gravy was the whole reason for the slow roast, a dark, rich, turkey-flavored sauce that turned a plate of white rice into a full meal. At a function, the pan came out covered and the foil got peeled back at the table. The steam carried the smell across the room before anyone saw what was inside. A single tray could hold 8 or 10 wings, each one large enough to fill a plate. The meat was tender, past the point of needing a knife. You pulled it apart with a fork or your fingers, laid it over rice, and spooned the gravy on until the rice disappeared underneath. Turkey wings were the kind of food that nobody bragged about bringing to a function, but the pan always came back empty. They were not glamorous. They were not the dish that people asked about in advance. They were the dish that ran out first because everyone took some and nobody left any behind. Today, turkey wings still appear in grocery stores, but the price has climbed far past what a tray of scraps should cost. What used to be a way to feed a table full of people on a small budget now carries a price tag that makes the cook pause at the counter. The wings are still there, the math is different, and the generation that knew how to stretch one tray across 10 plates without anyone feeling shorted is getting smaller every year. There is a pattern in this list worth naming. The cheapest foods in a black family's kitchen in the 1970s were often the ones with the most skill behind them. Caramel cake required a baker's nerve. Japanese fruit cake required a full day. Fried corn required knowing how to scrape a cob by feel. These were not simple foods made by simple people. They were complex foods made by people the economy refused to pay fairly. And here is what happened when those families gained access to better wages, office jobs, and suburban grocery stores. They left the hard foods behind, not because the food was bad, because the labor was a reminder. The next generation did not reject these dishes out of ignorance. They rejected them because they could finally afford to, and the table paid for it. Number 6, ambrosia. Fresh oranges peeled and sectioned by hand, mixed with freshly grated coconut, maraschino cherries, miniature marshmallows, and a spoonful of the cherry juice for color. Some versions added crushed pineapple or pecans. It went into a glass bowl and chilled until the flavors merged. Ambrosia sat on the dessert table at holiday functions and church homecomings, bright and sweet against the dark cakes and pies surrounding it. The fresh coconut was the line between the real version and the shortcut. Cracking a coconut, draining the water, prying the meat out, and grating it by hand took the better part of an hour. When packaged shredded coconut replaced the fresh kind, the bowl changed. It still showed up, but the people who remembered the original knew the difference with one bite. Number 5, muscadine hull pie. Muscadines grew wild on vines that climbed fences and trees across the South. The grape itself was thick-skinned, musky, and sweet in a way that no cultivated grape could match. To make the pie, the hulls were separated from the pulp. The pulp was cooked and strained to remove the seeds, and then the hulls and pulp were recombined with sugar and baked in a crust. The flavor was intensely grapey, almost perfumed, with a slight bitterness from the skins. Muscadine pie appeared at late summer and early fall functions in rural communities where the vines still grew. It was never commercially produced. When the families who knew where the vines grew stopped gathering them, the pie disappeared from the table without any store-bought substitute to replace it. Number 4, divinity candy. Boiled sugar syrup poured in a thin stream into stiffly beaten egg whites while someone else turned the hand mixer, then spooned onto wax paper in small clouds that dried into white, crumbly, melt on the tongue candy studded with pecans. Divinity required low humidity. A damp day ruined the batch. The women who made it watched the weather the way a farmer watches it, and they chose their day accordingly. At a holiday function, divinity sat on a plate next to the fudge and the pralines. It was the lightest thing on the table and the hardest to get right. 1 degree off on the sugar, and the candy never set. When the patience for candy thermometers and egg whites gave way to bags of store-bought sweets, the wax paper stayed in the drawer. Number 3, blackberry dumplings. Wild blackberries picked from roadside thickets and fence rows, simmered in a pot with sugar and water until the juice turned dark purple. Then, spoonfuls of biscuit dough were dropped into the bubbling fruit, the lid went on, and the dumplings steamed until they puffed up and soaked through with berry juice from the bottom and stayed pillowy on top. Blackberry dumplings appeared at summer functions in rural communities where the brambles still grew close enough to pick. The berries had to be wild. Cultivated blackberries were too large, too mild, and too expensive to dump into a pot by the quart. When the dirt roads got paved and the fence rows got cleared, the brambles went with them. The scratches on your arms and the purple stain on your fingers were the receipt, and nobody under 40 has one. Number 2, lemon cheese layer cake. Not a cheesecake, a tall white layer cake filled between each layer with lemon cheese, a cooked curd of eggs, sugar, butter, and fresh lemon juice, stirred over low heat until it thickened into a bright yellow paste that held its shape when the layers stacked. The outside was left bare or covered in a thin glaze. Lemon cheesecake appeared at Easter functions and spring homecomings across the South. The curd took patience and a steady hand. Too much heat and the eggs scrambled. Too little and the filling ran out the sides. The women who carried one to a function did so with both hands and a prayer that the road was smooth. When lemon cake mix and canned frosting arrived, the from-scratch version lost its next generation of bakers. Number 1, ash roasted sweet potatoes. A whole sweet potato, unwashed, buried in the hot ashes of a wood fire and left until the skin blackened and the inside turned to soft caramelized gold. No pot, no oven, no seasoning. The heat of the fire and the sugar in the potato did everything. This was the oldest way Black families in the South cooked a sweet potato, and at outdoor functions in the 1970s, someone still pulled them from the coals of the barbecue pit after the meat was done. Children ate them split open, scooping the flesh with their fingers while the skin was still too hot to hold for long. The sweetness was deeper than any oven could produce because the direct heat caramelized the sugars all the way through. Ash roasted sweet potatoes required a wood fire, and a wood fire required a yard, and a yard required a way of living that most families traded for something else. The food did not vanish because anyone forgot how to make it. It vanished because the fire went out. Number 10, chitlins. Chitterlings carry the deepest contradiction in soul food. Some Black Americans embrace them as a hard-won delicacy born from the ingenuity of their ancestors. Others reject them as a relic of oppression they never want to revisit. Both responses are valid. Both are grief. During slavery, enslaved people received the parts of the hog the master's family would not eat. Intestines were among them. The cleaning process alone takes 3 to 6 hours of meticulous hand labor, soaking in multiple changes of water. The smell during cooking is so powerful, it was and still is a source of both pride and embarrassment within the Black community. A 10-pound bucket of chitterlings costs $15 to $25 today, but the real cost is labor. Adrian Miller, the James Beard Award-winning culinary historian, has documented how chitlins retained their holiday status despite being increasingly rejected by younger generations. Industry observers predict they may largely disappear from Black American kitchens within the next generation. That disappearance will not be mourned by everyone, but if your family made them, you will feel it.
Lemon icebox pie was the cool sigh after a long Sunday meal, the kind of dessert that refreshed and revived all at once. It came together without fuss, just condensed milk, eggs, lemon juice, and a graham cracker crust pressed by hand. Mama mixed it smooth, poured it in, and let the fridge do the rest. No oven, no rush, just patience and chill. The pie set firm overnight, so by the next afternoon it sliced clean and gleamed like sunshine on a plate. Tart enough to wake you up, sweet enough to keep you coming back, it was balance made edible. The first bite hit sharp, then melted soft and silky. Folks would sneak spoonfuls before dinner, claiming to just test it, but everyone knew better. Lemon icebox pie was a reward for making it through another week, a sweet pause between the noise of living and the peace of resting. Its flavor stayed long after the last crumb was gone. That bright citrus tang reminded everyone that joy could be simple: a pie, a quiet moment, and someone to share it with. Cool, creamy, and endlessly comforting, It was the taste of Sunday's peace in every slice.
Number 25, smothered pork chops. Back then, this was the dish that told the whole neighborhood you had a grandmother who knew what she was doing. A woman in Monroe, Louisiana, started these pork chops at 7 in the morning, right after she pressed her church dress. She seasoned thick bone-in chops with salt, pepper, garlic powder, and a pinch of something she would never name. She dredged them in flour and fried them golden in a cast iron skillet that had been in her family since 1931. Then she scraped the bottom of that pan, added sliced onions and water, and covered those chops until the gravy turned the color of dark honey. She never measured the flour. She never timed the simmer. She said the chops would tell you when they were done by the way the meat pulled from the bone. Her granddaughter asked for the recipe in 2003 and got a 3-word answer: season it right. That was the entire recipe. Number 11, roast leg of lamb. Black preachers drew a direct line from the Israelites, marking their doors with lamb's blood, to black families surviving slavery and Jim Crow. If you sat in that pew, you understood. Easter lamb was not just dinner. It was theology you could taste on your own plate. In rural southern communities through the mid-20th century, many black families kept small flocks of sheep. Edna Lewis, born in Freetown, Virginia, a farming community founded by freed slaves after the Civil War, described spring sheep shearing as a community event. The lamb would be roasted whole or as a leg for Easter Sunday. A whole leg of lamb averaged $4.50 per pound in 2000. It now runs $9 to $12, putting a 7-pound leg at $63 to $84. United States lamb production has declined roughly 85% since the 1940s, from over 56 million sheep to under 5 million. As black families urbanized and moved north, access to fresh lamb declined. Ham took over as the default Easter meat. The lamb and its sermon disappeared together.
Bread pudding with raisins was a quiet masterpiece of thrift and tenderness. Nothing in Mama's kitchen ever went to waste, especially bread. Leftover loaves were torn into pieces, soaked in sweet milk, eggs, and butter, then baked until the top turned golden and the inside stayed soft as custard. Raisins gave it sweetness, cinnamon gave it soul, and the smell gave it away before anyone asked what was cooking. It was humble food made holy, transforming scraps into comfort that filled every corner of the room. Families gathered around the pan the moment it came out, spoons ready, patience gone. Sometimes a drizzle of syrup or cream finished it off, but it never needed help. Every bite was warm, spiced, and familiar, the taste of Sundays and second chances. Bread pudding was proof that grace could be baked from what others might throw away. It carried the lesson that love does not come from plenty but from purpose. Mama never measured. She just knew when it felt right. That instinct made it perfect every time. Even now, the thought of it softens hearts, reminding us that what's made with care lasts longer than any recipe written down.
Number 9, pound cake. In a black church, being known as the woman who made the best pound cake was a title that outranked deacon. It was earned through decades of perfection, and the recipe died with you unless you chose to pass it on. The Easter pound cake followed the original formula: 1 pound each of butter, sugar, eggs, and flour. No baking powder, no baking soda, no leavening at all. The rise came entirely from beating air into the eggs by hand. 30 to 45 minutes of beating before electric mixers became common in the 1950s. That was 1 pound of butter, 4 sticks, about 8 to 10 eggs. Among Gullah Geechee communities in the South Carolina Lowcountry, pound cake recipes were never written down. They were memorized through years of watching and helping. Ron Dace, a Gullah Geechee cultural preservationist from St. Helena Island, has worked to document these recipes before the last generation of bakers who hold them passes away. The modern pound cake is lighter, leavened, often from a box mix. It is a fundamentally different product. The original required arms that did not quit. That was the whole secret. Here is what most people do not realize about Black Easter food. There were two Easters, church Easter and home Easter. Church Easter was the public performance. You showed up in your finest clothes. The choir sang. The sermon connected resurrection to liberation. After the service, the potluck tables held deviled eggs, banana pudding, potato salad, pound cake, made by the best cooks in the congregation, and everyone knew who they were. Home Easter was different. Home Easter was the ham curing since November, the oxtails braising since dawn, the greens simmering since the night before, the caramel cake that took 3 attempts to get the icing right. Home Easter was where the real cooking happened, away from the church lady's judgment, where your grandmother could take her time and cook what her grandmother taught her. The potluck fed the community. The home table fed your soul. Both are vanishing. The potluck because churches are shrinking. The home table because families are scattered. 2 Easters, both nearly gone.
Banana pudding with vanilla wafers was the crown jewel of Sunday desserts, cold and creamy with layers that meant patience. Mama would line the pan with golden wafers, spoon-thick vanilla custard over them, and tuck in sliced bananas so ripe they almost melted on sight. Then came another layer, and another, each one smoother than the last. It sat overnight in the fridge, firming just enough so that when the spoon hit, it gave a soft sigh of surrender. Some topped it with meringue, others with whipped cream, but everyone agreed it was best served, chilled and quiet, with laughter somewhere nearby. Kids fought for the corner pieces where the wafers had gone soft and sweet, and elders got the first scoop for respect's sake. It was a dessert that spoke of care, measured, layered, and perfectly timed. No one rushed banana pudding. It was love that needed to set. Every family gathering ended the same way, with someone scraping the bowl for the last taste. It was simple food made sacred by routine, a Southern blessing turned ritual. Even now, one spoonful takes you right back to that crowded kitchen, full of stories, heat, and the sound of joy humming low like gospel.
Number 23, collard greens. If you walked into a Black kitchen on a Sunday morning and did not smell greens simmering with the smoked ham hock, something was wrong. Collard greens were the backbone of the Sunday table, and the recipe existed only in the hands of the woman stirring the pot. She started with the ham hock, dropped into a deep pot of water. She added vinegar, whichever bottle she grabbed first. She tore the collard leaves off the stems by hand, washed them 3 times in cold water, and packed them into the pot so tightly the lid barely closed. Then she cooked them low and slow for 3 hours until the leaves turned silky and the potlikker at the bottom became the richest broth you ever tasted. The seasoning was salt, pepper, a little sugar to cut the bitterness, and whatever else her mother's hands had taught her. No 2 women made their greens the same way, and if you asked which version was best, you would start an argument that still has not been settled. Number 13, neck bones and rice. For families who could not afford Easter ham, neck bones were never a consolation prize. Grandmothers braised them for hours until they produced a gravy so rich that children fought over the last spoonful on the rice. It was love measured in time, not money. Pork neck bones were another cut given to enslaved people because nobody else wanted them. The bones were seasoned heavily, then braised for hours until the small amount of meat fell away and the bones created a thick, deep gravy, served over white rice. Neck bones cost 50 cents to $1 per pound through the 1990s. They now sell for $3 to $5, a 300 to 500% increase. Just like oxtails, the price rose the moment people outside your community discovered the flavor. Joyce White documented this dish in her 1998 cookbook, Soul Food, collecting recipes from church cooks across the South who had been making it their whole lives. Smoked neck bones also served double duty. A single bone could season an entire pot of greens or black-eyed peas. Nothing in your grandmother's kitchen went to waste. Nothing ever could.
Peach cobbler with biscuit crust was the kind of dessert that announced itself before you ever saw it. The smell of bubbling peaches thickened with sugar, and butter floated through the air, wrapping around you like a hug after church. Mamas would drop spoonfuls of biscuit dough across the top, never too perfect, always just right. In the oven, it browned into golden peaks that cracked open to reveal syrup thick as honey. Served hot from the skillet, it hissed when the first spoon cut through, juices pooling under the crust. Vanilla ice cream on top was optional, but nobody ever said no. This was the dessert that could turn silence into praise and leftovers into legend. You could taste the sunshine in every bite, sweet from the fruit, warm from the oven, and rich from the hand that stirred it. Peach cobbler carried the spirit of summer even in winter, reminding everyone that joy was meant to be shared. It was messy, sticky, and absolutely perfect. Proof that flavor came from feeling, not fancy tools. The last bite always tasted like gratitude, the kind that lingers long after the bowl's been scraped clean. One spoonful, and the whole world slowed down.
Number 22, baked macaroni and cheese. This wasn't the kind from a blue box. This was a Sunday production. A woman in Atlanta mixed elbow macaroni with 3 or 4 kinds of cheese, eggs, evaporated milk, butter, and a seasoning blend she kept in an unmarked jar. She poured it into a casserole dish and baked it until the top turned golden and the edges got crispy enough to snap. The middle stayed creamy and soft. The secret, she said, was in knowing when to pull it from the oven, not by a timer, but by the color of the crust. According to food historians, James Hemings, an enslaved chef who trained in France, brought macaroni and cheese to American tables in the 1700s. And 200 years later, Black women had perfected it into something that had everything to do with a kitchen full of family waiting for Sunday dinner. The recipe was never written down because it changed every time. A little more cheese one week, a little less milk the next. If you asked her how much of each, she couldn't tell you. She adjusted by feel, and it was never wrong. Number 12, smothered chicken. They called it the gospel bird. Fried and smothered chicken appeared after church on Sundays and at every religious holiday, especially Easter. The connection between Black Americans and chicken predates the offensive stereotype by centuries. Enslaved people were generally forbidden from raising expensive livestock, but they were usually permitted to keep chickens. Chicken became the one protein your ancestors could control, and Black women were selling fried chicken as entrepreneurs as early as the 1730s. Gordonsville, Virginia, became the fried chicken capital in the 1800s, where Black women sold pieces through train windows for 5 to 10 cents each, about $1.50 to $3 today. The smothered version was the Easter upgrade, pan-fried then braised in a thick onion gravy, served over rice, fancier than plain fried, worthy of the holiday. The tradition of cooking chicken for religious occasions may trace back to West African practices where chicken was prepared for spiritual ceremonies. Every Easter gospel bird carried the weight of that legacy. The one thing they were allowed to have turned into the foundation of economic freedom. That was not an accident. Number 24, candied yams. In the Black Sunday dinner tradition, candied yams were not a side dish. They were a declaration. A woman in Birmingham, Alabama, peeled sweet potatoes with a paring knife so old the handle had been wrapped in electrical tape twice. She sliced them thick, layered them in a baking dish with butter, brown sugar and a pour of vanilla she eyeballed from the bottle. No measuring spoons, no recipe, just decades of knowing how much sweet was enough. The yams went into the oven before church and came out when the sermon was over, bubbling in a syrup so thick you could hold a spoon upright in it. Some women added orange juice, others added nutmeg. The variations were as individual as the women who made them, and every version was correct because there was no written original to argue against. And by the early 2000s, most families had switched to canned yams from a grocery store. The slow-peeled, hand-sugared version faded out of your reach. Number 7, red drink. Shut out of the White House Easter egg roll. By segregation, Black families in Washington built their own celebration. By 1919, 55,000 people showed up at the National Zoo on Easter Monday, and the red punch they served traced the line back 400 years to West Africa. The original red drink was hibiscus-based. Enslaved people in the American colonies adapted the West African hibiscus tea tradition using local berries when the flowers were unavailable. The red color carried spiritual significance in West African cultures that survived the Middle Passage. Adrian Miller, the soul food historian, documented this journey in detail. By the 1920s and 1930s, commercial products like Kool-Aid and Big Red soda began replacing the homemade version. The hibiscus punch vanished. But here is what stayed in your culture: the insistence on red. Not any color, red. At Black gatherings across America, the red drink endured even after nobody remembered why it had to be red. 4 centuries of cultural memory compressed into a color. The recipe is gone, but your instinct remains.
Caramel cake was the showstopper of every Sunday table, a golden beauty that looked like celebration and tasted like devotion. Mama would stand by the stove, stirring sugar and butter until it turned just the right shade of amber, never letting it burn. The caramel frosting had to be watched, whispered to, and poured at the perfect moment. Too soon, and it ran thin. Too late, and it stiffened like candy. But when she got it right, it draped over soft yellow layers like satin. The cake was tender, buttery, and rich enough to make conversation stop mid-sentence. Folks cut it carefully, as though it might disappear if handled wrong. The sweetness clung to your teeth, the flavor to your heart. Caramel cake was not just dessert. It was a skill, a tradition, a gift that proved patience could taste like perfection. It was the dessert everyone waited for and nobody refused. Long after the plates were empty, people still talked about that frosting, shiny as glass and sweet as memory. It was a labor of love and proof that the best things in life take time, attention, and a steady hand stirred by care.
Number 21, fried chicken. Every woman had her own fried chicken, and no 2 batches tasted alike. A woman in Memphis kept her seasoning mix in a coffee can on top of the refrigerator. She soaked the chicken in buttermilk overnight and dredged each piece through seasoned flour, measured by the shake of her wrist and nothing else. The skillet's oil had to be exactly the right temperature, and she tested it by dropping a pinch of flour into the grease. If it sizzled and floated, the oil was ready. No thermometer, no timer. She stood at that stove and turned each piece exactly once, and she knew it was done by the sound of the sizzle, not by any clock on the wall. If you have ever walked into a kitchen where fried chicken was cooling on the counter wrapped in foil, you know what Sunday smelled like. That smell was the whole sermon. Here is what made her timing right. Every pan was different. Every batch of oil was different. She compensated without thinking about it. Number 8, potato salad. In Black families, the question who made the potato salad is not casual. It is a security check. The wrong person's potato salad at Easter dinner could ruin the entire holiday, and everybody at that table knows it. Easter potato salad was a specific production. not the mayo heavy deli version. This was mustard forward, egg studded, with sweet pickle relish that turned it a distinctive yellow. Made the day before to let the flavors meld. Served cold, 5 pounds of potatoes, 8 eggs, 1 cup of yellow mustard. The dish migrated north with the Great Migration and became standard at every black gathering in northern cities. The designated potato salad maker in a family or church held a position of trust earned over years. You did not volunteer for that job. You were chosen. The tradition even traveled to Washington, D.C., where Easter Monday at the National Zoo became a massive gathering. By 1919, 55,000 Black Americans came to celebrate. Potato salad was there on every blanket and every table. That gathering started in 1891, the direct result of segregation at the White House Easter egg roll. Even joy had to be built from scratch.
Buttermilk pound cake was the smell that pulled every child from the yard and every grown man from his nap. Dense, buttery, and baked golden in a bundt pan, it was the dessert that never needed frosting to impress. Mama would pour the batter thick and smooth, humming to herself as she scraped the bowl clean. The scent filled the whole house long before the timer rang, and by the time it came out, the crust had turned just crisp enough to flake under your fingers. The inside stayed moist, soft, and rich, melting on the tongue like memory itself. It was sliced thin for company, thick for family, and never served without a smile. No matter the occasion, Sunday supper, a homecoming, or a neighbor's visit, there was always room for pound cake. The sweetness was steady, never loud, and that was what made it special. It was love baked slow and simple, using what the pantry offered and nothing more. You did not need icing when your heart was already full. Every crumb tasted like care, and the smell lingered long after the plates were washed. Buttermilk pound cake was more than dessert. It was the promise that home was always warm.
Every one of these dishes arrived on a table carried by someone who cooked from memory, not from a screen. These 25 foods did not vanish because they were bad. They vanished because the world that made them possible changed faster than the recipes could follow. If your family served any of these, put it in the comments. Tell the story behind it, who made it, what it smelled like when you walked through the door. And if you know someone under 30 who has never heard of half this list, share this video with them. The food may be gone from the table, but the memory does not have to go with it.